Hey everyone, welcome to episode 16 of Armbars Sidebars. Today we are joined by a star seen and heard in numerous pro wrestling promotions. He's been involved in wrestling for over 2.5 decades, known for his time in Omega, NWA Wildside, the Lightning One era of the National Wrestling Alliance, Ring of Honor, and AEW. Caprice, sir, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh man, thank you for having me. How you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm thrilled to talk with you. It's just I already told you off camera, but Sal Renaro, who is a channel favorite, he always speaks so highly of you, and I've been a fan of your work, so it's great to have you here. I really appreciate it.
I love Sal, man. Like I said before, I've known him since he was a teenager, and now he's a grown man married with children, and I love him.
All right, before we get into the interview, I always want to just get the plugs up front, and then at the end, that way people know where to find you, people know where to check you out. Where can people find you?
Well, man, I'm easy to find. I'm on Twitter, Caprice Coleman. I just got my Instagram page back up. I got hacked and all everything got shut down. I lost everything, so I'm kind of like in the rebuilding stages with Instagram, and so I got the Instagram. And I think that's it. I'm on TikTok as well. All of it's Caprice Coleman or the Caprice Coleman.
And of course, check out his Pro Wrestling Tees store. We will
Yeah.
have links to everything in the description of every video, this full video and the individual clips. So, guys, be sure to click, show some support, follow, buy a shirt, and check out Ring of Honor. Okay, so I like to start right from the beginning. This is the generic question, but I don't know. I grew up in the shoot interview era, so it's always interesting to me. When did you first see professional wrestling, and what were your initial thoughts on it? Were you a fan right away? Did not become a fan until later?
Oh man, I was an instant fan. I remember I was less than 5 years old, and I turned on the TV, and I don't even know if it was Georgia Championship Wrestling or NWA, but it was Dusty Rhodes, and he was I think feuding with Barry Windham or something like that, and they was talking about the devil in the boot. And man, I was hooked ever since because I think being hooked on like superheroes, Superman or whatever like that, to me, watching pro wrestling was like watching superheroes fight. And then I didn't have a father figure at the time, so it was kind of like father figure type, the male role model type thing as well. So yeah, I was
That's
probably less than 5 years old.
That's super fascinating because you're totally right when it comes to like the superhero comparisons. I wasn't always a big superhero fan. Like as a kid, I watched some cartoons, and then I actually got into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the movies later on, and you can just see the parallels. Like what wrestling is in many ways is just like live superhero movies that you can attend in person.
A million percent.
And then you talked about Dusty Rhodes, and I'm gonna guess we'll get into the favorite wrestlers in a second, but I'm guessing he stood out to you right away just because of that charisma and personality.
Well, absolutely. The funny thing is, like Dusty Rhodes, he walked like me and talked like me, but he didn't look like me, and so
Mm.
it was blonde hair and curly, blue eyes and curly blonde hair, and I was like, man, he sounded like my uncle. Yeah. Yeah, so he definitely got my attention.
So just the fact that you kind of relate to that, even though it was different, was
Yeah,
probably an immediate thing that was like, oh wow, okay, so someone I
yeah, it
kind of
was like this,
know.
this white dude on here talking jive. This is cool.
Fantastic. Okay, so Dusty Rhodes covered. Who else were some of your favorite wrestlers growing up? And I'm guessing the NWA was your favorite promotion, but did you go or that circle of the NWA? Did you see other promotions growing up? Obviously, eventually the WWF,
I
I'm sure.
Well, mostly it was NWA, and I was definitely like, I was young, but like, one person that stood out with me other than Dusty Rhodes, was Rocky King, because he looked just like somebody related to me with the Jerry curl and the muscles and all of that. So like watching him was like watching family. I was big Rock and Roll Express, Road Warriors, Barry Windham, Magnum TA, Lex Luger, Sting. I grew up on all that. Tommy Wildfire, Rich. I can go all of that.
You really love that
Who else?
babyface fire, then I'm guessing that
Yeah, man.
that
I
Southern
was a
baby.
Horseman. Yeah, I was a Horseman fan too. You grow up hating Ric Flair, but then he's so good, you kind of love him. Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard. You know, and I'm trying to think now because I kind of grew up the era Pillman, Eddie Guerrero, all of that, and then I wasn't really I liked world class championship wrestling too.
Oh, all
The
right.
Von Erichs, yeah, I was Von Erichs, Iceman, King Parson, um, Bruiser Brody, the Missing Link. You know what I'm saying? I can go there as well. And then I didn't really get into WWE until I was in like fourth grade. Like you had to have cable where I was from to get WWF at the time. And so only time I would see WWF is like the Rock and Wrestling
Oh, yeah.
cartoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would see that and I was like, oh yeah, I like Hulk Hogan. Oh yeah, I like the Junkyard Dog, and I definitely liked a Superfly Jimmy Snuka, or whatever like that. But I never really got to follow them because we didn't get WWF on regular television until we got cable, and that was probably like in sixth grade or something like that before we got cable.
This is off topic, but I'm just curious because I'm 31, so I kind of just missed the territories, the later end of the territories. I was born in 91, so by that point
Mm-hmm.
they were kind of phasing out. Were you a big like magazine, like even if you didn't buy them, like did you go in the store and look at like the PWI and see the different
Um,
stars?
um, 1,000,000%, man. When my mom went grocery shopping, she never had to figure out where I was. I was straight to the magazine aisle, and I would just sit down there, and rarely would I be able to buy one. But if I bought, I remember I probably bought two or three magazines, and of course had all the posters on my wall. But my brother, we shared a room with my brother. He didn't like the posters, so I couldn't have them up long, or at least like one side of the room or whatever. But I was definitely a huge magazine looker. And then as I got older, being in the magazine was like a big deal to me because I
Yeah.
remember sitting down as a kid, looking at the magazines, and then when you're actually in them, it's like, oh my God, like you made it.
Yeah, what jogged my memory with that is like I know they used to have like the top 10 challengers in each territory. So for a place that you didn't see, a Memphis or a WWF, like you're probably seeing like Hulk Hogan on a magazine cover and you're like, okay, wow, that's something completely different. But then what you brought up as being in it, the PWI 500 was something that I know I was obsessed with as a kid. So for you to later be in that has to be super cool.
Yeah, I really wasn't. I didn't know much about the PWI 500 until I was wrestling, and I tried to be one of those people that didn't let it, destroy me,
Mhm.
because some people they get in there and it's like, oh, why didn't I get here, or I'm higher than this or whatever like that. But then it's an opinion,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? But it's kind of dope, man, to be in the conversation of all of that, man. But yeah, I wasn't aware of it until I was actually in it, and then somebody explained it to me, and I was like, "Cool!" Like,
Yeah. Hey, it's extra promotion, right?
yeah, it's really cool, really cool, really cool. And so now, I kind of keep up with it because I have a lot of students that are in it now,
Oh, that's
and
very cool.
to see somebody that I've watched, in wrestling and known them before they, took their first bump, and then to see them in magazines and on TV, that's where I'm at now.
Just because you talk about training people, this isn't even in the notes, but where have you been training people, just so people know your history a little bit on the
Well,
training side?
most of my training was at high spots before the school shut down, and I work with some with Lodi. Lodi has a training school as well. So mostly high spots in Lodi school and Cozone, LeBron Cozone, and uh, Greensboro, North Carolina. He has a training school that I'm at a lot as well. And those three, I'm more at. I was at High Spots weekly. I was working there,
Yeah.
and that's where most of my kids come from. But then after High Spots, I was time wise, I spent more time at Cozones. But then Lodi lives in Charlotte, and so I train kind of like one on one, or when I have time, I go and train with Lodi in his class. But when I'm there, he kind of just kind of backs up and lets me kind of do the class type thing, because we know we have different styles, and he respects mine. And he's like, "Oh, was Caprice here, y'all? Let him do a class or whatever." And I've known Lodi for, oh man, 20 years or something. So we have a great relationship. And same thing with Cozone. I've known him since he wasn't even 18 when I met him. And so it's just great relationships, man. When I look into sport, I've been in this sport 28 years, and the relationships I have, it's just phenomenal.
The high spots thing, did that just shut down because of COVID? Is that what led to the school shutting down?
Um, I, I- I'm not sure. I
Okay.
think what happened was the building we were in, the like, I don't know all the details. I just know the build. We had a good building we was in, was running shows in it and everything. And then the owner just all of a sudden didn't want wrestling in the building. Like
Ugh.
he, like just all of a sudden just didn't want wrestling, and we knew about it for a couple of months. And then the school shut down. And my main thing is making sure, none of the kids got lost, and all of them are still going at it, man. And so I'm just proud of them.
You obviously you still wrestle and at a high level, and then on top of that, you do broadcasting. Do you ever see a day where maybe you open up your own school full time in the future?
Uh, I don't know. I've thought about it. My brother and I, we talk about it all the time. And yeah, in my head, it's like the Ageless Academy,
Yeah, that
that
sounds
I
good.
want to do. Yeah, and I definitely would love to do it. But I'm the type person, I don't start anything unless I can see myself finishing it, because there's no use in having a bunch of candles lit if you don't have any fires burnt. And so if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. You know what I mean? I'm not just gonna have it.
That's a really good philosophy, and I like that analogy too. You mentioned least favorite wrestlers. You mentioned hating the Four Horsemen and then loving them. Were there any other wrestlers, like as a kid or growing up, that you couldn't stand? I don't mean like people you had professional business dealings with that went bad, but
Right,
just
right,
as a
right, right,
fan.
right. And I think as that with that aspect, if I hated them, they were doing their job. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
absolutely.
So definitely like Ric Flair, Tully Blanchard. Um, let's see who else. Anybody that would join the Horsemen after being a good guy. Like, I was a Lex Luger fan until he joined the Horsemen. Barry Windham until he joined the Horsemen. And let me see who else.
Guessing like the Russians and stuff like that, probably.
Nikita Koloff. I don't know. It's weird. I kind of feared him.
You know,
You know what I mean? It's not like I hated him. Only time I really hated, like if he cheated, using the chain or whatever like that. But he was one of those guys that when he came out, it was like he just had your attention. And now it's like I'm friends with him, and I'm like,
wild.
it's crazy. But yeah, Nikita Koloff. You might have to jog my memory on some of these things, man.
Well, I was
But
thinking like
yeah,
the Harley Race and those people
mm,
like
no, not too. I wasn't too. Holly Race didn't have too much of an effect on me. Um,
I know Vader
I
came
was
later.
Vader was actually cool to me. He was kind of scary, but it wasn't really like anybody that I hated. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? I made uh unless they made you and they were just doing their job or whatever. So I really have to be reminded of a name, and like if I had a name, I could think, oh yeah, you know what I'm saying? Oh no. But there's nobody that comes to mind, and maybe it's because of the years that I have in and like understanding what's happening.
Growing
Everybody's kind of
appreciation.
like yeah, it's kind of appreciation, shade of gray type thing now. And so I apologize for that.
No, it's no problem. I'll throw out one more name because I feel like he may have done it. Jim Cornette in the Midnight Express.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, you know what? Um, yeah, Jim Cornette was one that when you saw him, you wanted him to get hit. You wanted
Yep.
something to happen to him. You see him with that tennis racket, and I was like, man, how is he even allowed to carry this thing out? He's gonna use it as a weapon. And yeah, he was a huge heel, and that's what made the money, man. It wasn't the wrestlers; it was the managers that were the heels that made you like hate them. You know what I mean?
Do you
And
feel like that's a lost art these days?
it absolutely, because I liked the Midnight Express. I thought beautiful Bobby Eaton was probably the greatest innovator for his time, definitely ahead
Amazing
of his time.
wrestlers.
Yeah, Sweet Stan Lane, he was like cool and had the body and all that. I just hated Jim Cornette. I think probably the greatest manager now would definitely be Paul E.
Yeah.
Just because he's kind of a morph of Jim Cornette. He knows who he is, and he has that mouth, and it's like you just want him to get hit, but then like what he's saying, he's never really lying. He's telling the truth. You just don't want to accept it. You know what I mean?
It's almost more
Uh,
annoying that he's being honest.
yeah, yeah. He's got an art in his own self, man, and he's just a wise guy for the business in itself, and so he's a great manager. Believe it or not, I'm a huge fan of Prince Nana too.
Yeah.
Working with him in Ring of Honor, uh, when any role that I had in Ring of Honor, I was the talker, like in the group. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so I remember a match that I had when I was tagging with Cedric, and Cedric was in the ring, and I think he was going against Tommaso Ciampa. And so I'm supporting, Cedric on the outside of the ring, and Nana at that time had Ciampa in the embassy. And so I'm just, supporting stuff on the outside and saying stuff back and forth. And man, he just destroyed me to the point to where I couldn't I got out of character because I'm laughing at the stuff he's saying to me. Like he's just killing me. I'm like, this dude is phenomenal. So I'm like, I'm trying to save face and trying to, say stuff back or whatever. But then I just found myself like trying to get as far away from him as possible
That's
because
amazing.
he had my number, man. And I'm a very witty person, but like he just knows his character, and like he's so much of his character that when you hear him say stuff, I'm like, bruh, you meant that, didn't you? Like, he's awesome. He's awesome.
Okay, so now the question is, and this is going to be a little complicated, I think, because of how you got involved, but what was your first break and how did you break into wrestling? Like, where was your in? Because I know there's the Omega stuff, but I'm not sure when things became, stuff with friends, when things became legitimate. Like, what was that journey for you?
It was definitely with the Omega when I stayed, and with wrestling, everywhere that I went, I've kind of thought that was the next big thing mentality, and that's been like a kind of a great thing and a kryptonite for me because like when I was with Omega, I thought Omega was going to be the next WCW, or you know what I mean,
Yeah.
because of the talent that we had or whatever. So I was definitely a mainstay there. And then anywhere else, Matt and Jeff and Jason and Shannon and Marty would go, they would bring me along because I was a wrestler for Omega, but I was a manager, a referee on the road with them, until I got to the point to where I was getting booked in matches with Shannon and Joey Mercury, and Christian York and Shane Helms, and until I started getting matches at other places with those guys. For the most part, I was a referee with them on the road until I would bring my referee shirt and my wrestling gear, and then after a while, I didn't have to bring my referee shirt anymore. I actually still have it. When I did the deletion thing with Matt,
Mhm.
I
Fun.
wore my referee shirt from like 25 years ago.
That was that shirt. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
and it was signed by Sir Mo, like Sir Mo from Men on the Mission. That's how long I've had that shirt. Like when Men on the Mission came, they had a show, and they came to Omega. Well, Sir Mo came to Omega, and for one time, and like it was right when Men on the Mission, they were kind of hot, and I think maybe he had just got released or just had some time or something. He just did a show and he signed my shirt, and he did it in a permanent marker, so like it's still on there.
That's so cool. But with the training, because as far as I know, were you just then self-trained with those guys? Is that like how you started? Because I know eventually you would pick things up and
Well, Matt and Jeff, they were self-trained, but then they got trained.
you know,
And when they got trained, they told me in a later interview, actually, like last year, I did a thing with them at WrestleCade, and Matt kind of explained to me how I was their first like real student after being trained. And they gave me a hard time, really because before I came, there were people that came to try out to be wrestlers, or they were looking for wrestlers. Like they would have people at the gym that looked good, and it was like, "Hey, you ever thought about pro wrestling?" type thing. And some of these guys would come once or twice and leave and say, "Oh, yeah, I tried that pro wrestling stuff." It's just, they would talk bad about it or go
oh,
off saying they're a pro wrestler, or you know what I mean, and start getting bookings, and they only came to practice twice, or whatever. And and so Matt kind of felt like, you know, he was being too easy on these people where because he knew them. So in his head, I think the next time he actually had a student, he was gonna, you know, test them and see if they really wanted it. And I really wanted it, you know, and so they gave me a hard time, but I just kept showing up. And after a while, you know, we all became family, and we still are, man. Every one of them are my brothers.
Did you always know you wanted to get involved in wrestling since you were a kid, or how did you like luck
Yeah.
into that?
Uh, Anybody that knows me growing up, I've always been a wrestling fan to a fault. Like when my friends grew out of it, I never grew out of it,
Mm-hmm.
and to a fault. Where the older I got, the younger my friends got. Because like my friends, you know, around 12, 13, 14 years old, it was like, oh, we don't like wrestling anymore. And so I was still kind of friends with them, but then I was mostly friends with friends that were wrestling fans. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of young friends because of the fact that I was still a wrestling fan.
So how did you end up meeting the Hardys to get trained by them in the first place?
I was let me see. I was out one day and I saw somebody putting up posters for a local wrestling event, and I really didn't know that was a thing. I knew nothing about indie wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And but I wrestled all the way through high school, and I saw the guy's name was Commando putting out a poster for a local event, and I was renting the tapes. Now they had VWF, TWF, it was Trampoline Wrestling Federation, and Matt Hardy somehow the local Sandhills Video store somehow he had got the Trampoline Wrestling Federation videotapes
That's
uh,
wild.
in the store, yeah. And so I thought it was cool, and so I would rent them out or whatever. But like the tapes in the video store were old, you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so when I met this guy that was putting up the posters, it was about I saw the same guys on there that were on this Teen Wrestling Federation thing, you know. And it's funny because when I first started wrestling, I knew the owner's daughter of the video store. We went to school together, and I remember telling her that, you know, I'm gonna be a pro wrestler. I wrestle with high voltage. And in her eyes, she was like, "Yeah, but they're the trampoline guys." Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, "No, they're really gonna make it one day." Um, and she was just kind of like, in a way, trying to encourage me without being like, "Bless your heart." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but yeah. So then it all just came together. So I was watching. I came to the practice. I told the guy that I wanted to wrestle, and then he told me where to meet him at or whatever. Because I said I wrestled all the way through high school, and then when I pulled up, it was in Tracy Cadell's yard, which is Trevor Cadell's dad. Y'all know him as Cameron Grimes.
Yep.
So it was his dad. His dad had the ring in the yard, and Trevor was a kid. I mean, still wearing diapers, kid. Boy, he was very young at the time, but he was always there. You know what I mean? So I literally watched Trevor grow up until the man that he is today, and the world has not seen what this man can do. This man is Omega embodied, and he's just now got drafted, I think, into SmackDown,
Yep.
and the sky's the limit, man. All he's ever done his whole life is wrestle. All he's ever been around his whole life is wrestlers. He's the next big thing in my eyes.
Such a great athlete. He's so charismatic. He's
Yeah,
so good.
he's
Like
a
as a
natural.
fan. Ugh.
He's a natural. He's natural at everything, and he keeps getting better. And he wants to learn and wants to get better. And like his hardest critic is himself. Like that's the best you could be in a sport.
And you never know if these things are true or not, you know, with reports, but supposedly Triple H and other officials love him and they see huge things for him. And I can see why, because how couldn't you? That's my opinion.
Yeah, he's the type person that I know enough about him to know that one time he fell on hard times, and he actually lived at a training school like for a while until he got on his feet. But like the out of everything he wanted to do, he wanted to wrestle. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? And this is when he kind of got on his own or wherever like that. And so he loved it so much to where he actually lived and slept in the training school. And so that just kind of shows you his commitment of how much he wanted the sport, man. And he still loves it today.
And to see that paying off now, both
Yeah,
with his career and financially after that kind
yeah.
of, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, because he would do things to make money, and I don't want to tell a lie, make up anything, and then you take this clip and the one clip that it'd be something crazy. But I know that he was committed so much to pro wrestling, he didn't want to do anything else but pro wrestling, to the point to where in hard times he lived at a pro wrestling school.
No, that's crazy. Now you brought up something interesting because of the Trampoline Wrestling Federation. The mid to late '90s and even the early 2000s, the indie scene was obviously completely different to what it became. And then like backyard wrestling became a big thing. Like you would see in stores, literally, like you brought up the Trampoline Wrestling Federation, but there was like Best of Backyard Wrestling Volume 1, 2, 3. Like you had all these things going on because there might not have been as many ins for wrestling, and a lot of people were just doing backyard wrestling because they loved it. What were your thoughts at the time? Because again, you were a fan of that stuff, but then you went into real training with Matt and Jeff. Did you find like the backyard, or did you see that as like, oh, this isn't good for wrestling? Or were you like, hey, they love wrestling just like I love wrestling. They just need to go the right route to get into it? Like, what were your thought processes?
I didn't know anything about backyard. It was to me it wasn't backyard wrestling, even though it was, but I didn't view it as backyard wrestling. I was like, man, these guys are wrestling like because I wrestled in the yard, like you know what I'm saying. I didn't have
Yeah.
like a federation, but I wrestled with my friends in the yard. I was just thinking, man, these guys they're wrestling in the yard, but they're recording it and they're actually really good, but they're on a trampoline. You know what I'm saying? And it was a few tapes they had in the video store, so I didn't have an opinion on when I started wrestling and I would see the backyard wrestlers or whatever that were like in the backyard. I didn't have an opinion on how it affected the sport. I had an opinion on how it affected them because I would see a lot of people, the videos, you mostly see videos of somebody getting hurt, falling off of a building or falling, through
Yeah.
something and getting cut up or whatever like that. And that was my thing. It was just kind of like, man, these guys are killing themselves and they don't know what they're doing. And then what's his name? There's a guy in Japan. They had like the exploding rings and all that type of
Oh,
stuff.
Anita.
Anita. So I was, I would be in the grocery stores and I would see like the magazines of him and like the stuff they were doing and whatever. And I was just like, I guess somebody's doing it, but like it was mind blowing to me, the amount of pain these people were willing to go through. But to me, it was their like, that was their addiction type thing,
Mhm.
like kind of like how much pain can I put myself through type thing. So if anything, there was a time where I had to ask myself, like, am I like that? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Somebody that has like a thing for pain or, a thing for attention or, and I think we all have some type of vanity to us to be in this sport. But I also think there's kind of a line where you're harming your body intentionally, and just getting, praise for it, whatever. But then it's kind of like that's just who you are. Some people they make money at it, or whatever. So it just kind of to me introduced uh, that type of wrestling to people that weren't trained to start with, and causing them to get hurt because they didn't know the concept of pro wrestling to start with, and they're just going out, hurting themselves, putting themselves through things, and they don't have the concept now. And so that was my main concern of people really getting hurt imitating something that don't try this at home type thing.
Yeah, and I mean, there's levels to everything. I mean, wrestling is going to be dangerous no matter. Look at what Hulk Hogan dropping the leg did to his body. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah,
you wouldn't
absolutely.
never would have thought looking at it, just dropping the leg drop would have done what it's done to him. But
Yeah,
then you think about the rings over and over at that weight,
yeah.
dropping
The swanton dive, the
yeah.
swanton bomb. Yeah, it's saying it does have. In fact, now for a while I had the Sky Splitters, a leg drop. I used to drop the top rope to a standing opponent, and people used to say, "Hey, man, watch yourself on that," and I still do it from time to time, but you feel them. This I do this triple Northern Light suplex. I call it the Trinity, and that's a move that I can kind of feel over the time, like in my neck. Like when you hit it, it's kind of like, oh, I hit my neck. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm.
It's just over time you can feel those things build up. And it made me realize that, even though Hulk Hogan had the hip problems, he was probably one of the smarter guys. Him and Ric Flair, one of the smarter guys in the business, because they were known for things other than their wrestling moves. I mean,
Yeah.
Ric Flair had the figure four, but that woo will go on forever. You know what
Mm.
I'm saying? The call from the ear will go on forever. What you gonna do or whatever, go on forever. So it kind of put me in a place to try to find things that I can do forever instead of leaping ranas and triple northern light suplexes and dives, and you know what I mean, because that type of stuff you can't do forever.
You got to adjust as you get older. How is
Yeah,
your body holding up these days, if you don't mind me asking?
man, God is so good to me. I owe it to nothing but Him. I really feel like it's y'all's fault because y'all call me the ageless one. And yeah, and it has spoken into my life. I don't have any nagging injuries. I don't have anything that I wake up and have to do. I mean, I'm older, and of course, I stretch more and all that, and of course, you get joints that are swollen or whatever like that. But by the grace of God, I am healthy. I have my right mind. I don't have uh, any nagging injuries that I have to tell people about. Before I wrestle or anything like that. And to God be the glory, man, because I know this sport is meant to break you down, but somehow, in some way, I've been able to go 28 years and I'm healthy and I have my right mind and I'm happy and I'm in a sport and position of longevity with commentary and I'm able to wrestle as well. And it's nothing but a blessing, man. I can't say, oh, I did this and this is the reason why, because I look at some of the matches I've done. And there's no reason why I should be as healthy as I am now, but I am, and it's a blessing. I really feel that we have the ability to speak things into existence. I really believe that. And the Bible says, with long life, I will satisfy you and put you in great places. And I really believe that, and when you believe God's word, it's not like, oh, I've put in a time warp or whatever like that. A lot of the blessings that happen are blessings that you still have to, faith without works is dead. So you still have to do things. So I take care of my body. I watch what I eat. I work out. I stretch. I moisturize. I do a lot of do it yourself type stuff. I've learned how to do things myself. I cut my own hair and all that type of thing. And I just learned how to take care of myself through by the grace of God, and it has added longevity to my life. I've been hurt enough that I know how to rehab injuries, and
Mm-hmm.
I was a personal trainer for years, and so I know how to prevent injuries as well. And so in all of it, I give the glory to God, man, because I feel good. And I'm not trying to sell anything, I guess, except Christ, but it's the truth.
It really is miraculous though, because if someone saw you for the first time, they would think this dude's, a 30-year-old in there, you know what I mean? Based on your appearance, of course, but also, how you move in the ring. And then
Yeah,
when you take in, you have almost 30 years of experience. It's
yeah.
wild.
I'm 46 years old, man, and God's been good to me.
Wow. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly touch on what I found in my research was your first match, but this research isn't always accurate. So,
Mm.
especially, 90s wrestling, so much of it isn't documented. So just please correct
Yeah.
this if it's incorrect. What I have here for the NFWA on August 23rd, 1998, you as Ice wrestled the Punisher, who I believe was Bull Buchanan. Was this actually your
Oh
first
my.
match?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Wow, okay, so it's right.
New Frontier Wrestling Alliance. That's what Omega was before they changed the name.
Oh, I didn't
Before
realize
that,
that.
yeah, it was New Frontier Wrestling Alliance. And before that, it was East Coast Championship Wrestling or something like that. Then it went to New Frontier Wrestling Alliance, and that's when I went from referee to wrestler. and I wrestled Punisher. I'm not sure if it was Paul Buchanan or whatever. I don't want to lie about that.
Mhm.
I think Devastator was another local, but he was a huge guy. He was definitely a huge guy, and I know he beat me pretty fast. It's not a match to go out and see. I don't even know. I think one day Omega's gonna come out with some footage or whatever, and it's gonna change the world, man. To see,
Throw all that
um,
up there.
oh my god, it's gonna be amazing. But yeah, yeah, you're right. I was ready to be like, no, but you're absolutely right.
How did the name Ice
What
come
what
about?
date was that? What
Um,
date
Aug-
was that?
August 23rd, 1998.
Oh my god, let me I gotta write this down. You
Yeah.
said what was your next question?
It was just going to be how the name Ice came about. Like, did you just come up with that on your own? Did they give it to you? But yeah.
No, I was a big you said 1998.
Yep. August 23rd,
Okay.
1998.
There was this movie called The West Side Story, and I'm also into music or whatever like that. And West Side Story was a movie about two gangs, and this girl named Maria. Are you familiar with the West Side Story?
I know the basis, the
Yeah,
feuding gangs, but
yeah,
that's pretty much
the
it.
feuding gangs, and one of the gang members that I was learning about it in chorus or whatever, and one of the gang members' name was Ice, and I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. Like his name was Ice, and so before I graduated high school, like my wrestling name was Ice.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. And so then when I went in to training, my stepdad came with me to training, and Matt was trying to. I think this is in the Hardy Boys book as well. I went to take a bump and I couldn't take a bump, and my dad had like a big old cup of ice. Just happened to have a cup of ice, and he takes the ice cubes and he puts them in my hand and crossed my hand. And I took the bump, and so that this still pops Matt and Marty to the day, and Jeff as well. But like it was basically it was funny because it was like, oh, he put ice in his hand, he could take the bump. But that's how much support I was getting from my stepdad at the time, supporting me in becoming a pro wrestler.
What made you eventually change the name?
Uh, I didn't. It's kind of like there was an era, I guess, with WCW where everybody was just being real,
Mm-hmm.
who they are, and I went from being Ice, I think, then it went to like the notorious ICE, and then it went to Caprice Ice Coleman. You know, and it was for forever. It was Caprice Ice Coleman, and then after a while, it just became Caprice Coleman. You know, and then different nicknames would tally on to that. But people that really knew me, you know, wherever I went, it was like they would just say Ice.
Now, you already talked quite a bit about Cameron Grimes, how great he is, but there was a lot of people, and his father, of course, and there was a lot of people who made names for themselves from that company. So I just want to go over some of those names quickly. Of course, there's Matt and Jeff, they're the most obvious. How was your relationship over the years with them after, the training?
They are people that have never changed. Um, they've always kept in contact, even now. My son and Matt have the same birthday,
Oh,
and Matt will call my son on the birthday to say happy birthday. Sometimes they have done birthdays together. We're on the road. We work at the same place now, so we see each other often, and we're still good friends. And then Jeff, the same. Jeff is more quiet than Matt. Matt's really outgoing, but Jeff, he sit there, he have a conversation with you. It's all family, man. It's all love. Marty Garner kind of getting back on the scene. He was Champagne.
champagne.
Yeah, and he's somebody. Him and I have a lot in common now because we're both preachers, and so we definitely are in contact a lot. Shannon Moore.
Yep.
Oh man, it's a lot of Shane Helms, and Shane Helms and I are really good friends.
Could you talk about Shannon
Um,
Moore for a second? Because he's the guy that I always thought was pretty underrated. I like,
yeah,
but he's had a lot of. He's still really young too. I'm pretty sure. Isn't he like only like in his early 40s right now?
well,
I could be wrong on
possibly
that.
yeah. I was a little bit older than him, so yeah. Um, so yeah, he's same. We were when I got into like I said, I was the referee or whatever, and Matt was like, Shannon's the smaller guy, so he was kind of the underdog. And so when I started wrestling, it was like two underdogs, and that's kind of when Shannon started winning matches, or whatever. But like Shannon had a lot when he went places. Uh, he always, they would see him at the beginning and be like, "Oh, he's small," until he got in the ring, and then he would just tear the house down. And people, you got to understand, in the '90s, in the late '90s, on the indie scene, people were still doing like clothesline, leg drops, body slams, suplexes.
Mm-hmm.
It was if anybody went to the top rope, they went to the top rope to do like a splash or a big clothesline off the top rope, and that was a high flyer back in that time. So stuff that Shannon was doing, and Shannon was an innovator. Nobody's ever seen the stuff that Shannon and Jeff were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Shannon and Jeff had matches all over, as Wolverine and as Willow, or whatever. And so it would blow the minds, or whatever. And so Shannon was phenomenal anywhere he went. 3 count in
Yeah,
WCW,
so good.
and all of that. And then, Shannon Moore once more, and all that. I think he had a phenomenal career, always underrated, but I think that was mostly because, size,
Yeah.
the WWE, and I think if you look at people like, the person I think is the greatest wrestler of all time, Dean Malenko. When you go into a place like WWE, you have to be an entertainer too. And so a lot of wrestlers suffered because they weren't entertainers; they were just great wrestlers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad we're in a place now that you could be a great wrestler and a great entertainer, and you could still make it. But there it was like, you could be a great wrestler, but if you're not an entertainer, you're not gonna go but so far.
Especially in that
And
time
so,
period, that happened a lot
yeah,
then.
the attitude area and all that stuff. A lot of the great wrestlers suffered because of that, and it's like I think that's the thing of Ring of Honor, is that Ring of Honor is based on wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
We have our entertainers, but the art of wrestling, the sport of wrestling, is what our drive is.
And I think that's cool because it's different. You know what I mean? If everybody was doing the same exact thing as, WWE, then they wouldn't stand out. You want to have these companies be different and fill different, niches.
Mhm.
You brought up Shannon Moore being innovative. And when I think of innovation, another guy you brought up, I think of Shane Helms, Gregory Helms, the Hurricane, because
Mhm.
his moves, like I know moves don't really mean that much, but when you're a young fan and you start seeing things like the Vertebreaker, you're like, what is this? What in the world is
Yeah,
happening? You know what I mean?
absolutely.
What
Yeah,
was it like with him early on and as time went on?
it's we were all, you got to understand that with Omega, everybody in Omega were innovators. I'm an innovator, massive
Yeah.
innovator, just and we're all creative, and we all had moves, and we all had names for every one of our moves, and it kind of got on a lot of commentators' nerves because it's not a springboard moonsault, it's a megahertz. It's different moves. Name every move they had a name for it, and I had a name for every one of my unique moves, or whatever. That's just the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so when somebody would come up with a move, we just respect it. Okay, so and so got a new move. When I went to NWA Wildside, that was the first place that I've ever had been where everybody was innovative. And but other than that, any innovation that I've ever seen came through Omega. And even today in pro wrestling, there's a lot of moves that are done on TV that have been stolen from Omega guys and NWA Wildside
Yeah.
guys. And Sal Renaro is one of those guys that moves were just stolen from,
Mm-hmm.
because there were WWE Wildside and Omega wasn't big to the world, but it was big to a lot of wrestlers, and a lot of them would watch that and they would take moves from there, and then you see your move on TV and you'd be like, did that doing so and so's doing a move looks just like mine. And I never wanted to be like stole my move or whatever until I was in the presence of some WWE wrestlers, and they told me, it was like, man, we be on the bus and we be watching y'all NWA Wild Side tapes, and that's my move, and it told in my face, and so it's legit. We changed the world, man, and then you would get somewhere and you can't use that move because somebody's doing it, but it's like I invented the move. Like,
That's got to be where it gets tough, because on one hand it's a compliment, right, and it shows like
yeah,
how talented you are, that people want to steal that from you. And on the other hand, it's wrestling, there's only so many moves where people are going to take stuff. On the other hand,
yeah.
if you're making it and it's your like calling card and then you can't use it, that's
it's sometimes it's frustrating, mostly because of the fact there was a huge part in the early 2000s where it's not the person that invented it, it's the person that did it on TV first.
yeah.
And that's where a lot of frustration gets in, because you think, oh, I have the move that's gonna, a move's not gonna make you, but you see the diamond cutter or whatever, and I have my own version of the diamond cutter, or whatever, and I have my triple. I never would steal moves. I would take moves I like and make them my own.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So instead of doing the diamond cutter, I did thermal shock, which is a diamond cutter, but instead of landing on my back, I landed on my stomach.
Yep.
I was a huge fan of the Three Amigos, but instead of doing three suplexes, I did three Northern Light suplexes. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so
You
I
take
would
it and
take it and
twist.
put it. Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of like what we did, but other wrestlers, they would just verbatim just take the move, period, and just do it on TV, and then you see, oh my God, it's the greatest move I've ever seen. And then you'll say something like, well, yeah, that was my move. And they'd be like, yeah, but look at where you're doing it. Only 20 people saw it. Like, you know what I mean?
Ugh. Two other guys from Omega that I just want to bring up real quick, because one in particular I feel like never really got his due, although I don't know him obviously. Christian York and
Oh,
Joey
yeah.
Abs. I just
Oh,
want
yeah.
your thoughts on them.
Both guys that came through Omega, Christian York was an amazing guy. I don't know what I think Christian York and Joey Matthews, they were
And he was an Omega guy too, right? Joey Matthews?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. They were the what did Joey Matthews end up? There was a tag team name with Joey Mercury. I mean, with
He
John
eventually
John
did MNM in WWE, but
Eminem. That's who. Yeah, that's who we thought was Eminem. Christian York and Joey Matthews. But it ended up being
Morrison.
John Morrison. Well, and he's phenomenal too. I'm friends with him. But like when that first came out, it was just in my head. It was like, why isn't it Christian York? Because Christian York, he had the look. They were tagging together. He was an amazing athlete.
I think he got
Or
ECW. He
whatever.
got into ECW on the tail end though, right when they were kind of
Yeah,
going down.
yeah. You just never know, man. It's like once you get to a certain place and you get to that place where you can make it or whatever, the chopping block is weird, man. You just never know, what somebody's going to use no for, or why somebody's going to say no. And some people get the chopping block and you have no reason. There's no, and I'm not a nosy person either. You know what I'm saying? I'm not one of those that, oh, well, so and so did it. That's not me. I take things at face value. But when I saw the opportunity happening, when I saw Eminem, in my head it was like, man, that should be Joey Matthews and Christian York. That's just the way it was.
And what about Joey Abs? Could you talk about him a little bit, please?
Yeah, Joey Abs, he was Jason Art. He was big guy Venom. Uh, he definitely was one. He had a great opportunity. He was with the Mean Street Posse, or whatever like that. He was a great guy. He gave me a hard time, man. When we was in Omega, he just picking at me or whatever. But it was all in love. He actually, his dad owned like a big record company, or whatever. So he had like a shoot job, or whatever. And so there were times where I needed work done to my car, and I would just take it to their shop, and they would help me out. So like, yeah.
Yeah, the whole Mean Street Posse thing's interesting because he was like the worker of the group, while the other ones were like authentically like Shane's friends, is my understanding. So, and I know
Yeah, that's
Pete
exactly
Gas
what it was.
eventually did like try to train more and stuff like that, but still, I think it was interesting.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because you have Jason Art that can do. He was like a 265-pound dude that could do moonsaults and and all of that stuff. But when he was with the Mean Street Posse, he didn't have to do anything. He could just work that gimmick,
And it
you
was
know.
interesting because
So
he almost had to pretend like he couldn't wrestle as part of the
right,
gimmick, which is
yeah,
really interesting.
yeah, interesting and frustrating too, especially when if the crowd isn't really getting behind you because they're like, "Oh, these guys can't wrestle," but you actually can. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and you can't
Uh,
just suddenly start doing it, you know.
and you can't overnight. Oh, now I'm a great wrestler. Like you know what I'm saying?
It's kind of
So
like, to throw out a really nerdy reference because we talked about Marvel and superheroes earlier. Spider-Man once said, once he got his powers, he couldn't start playing football because he couldn't when he was in high school because he couldn't before. So if he started doing it now, people would be like, "How are you suddenly athletic and good at football?" And it's kind of the
yeah,
same. So there's another
yeah,
parallel.
yeah. And that's kind of it's been my thing. I guess my thorn in the side with pro wrestling, because I'm versatile. Through the 28 years that I've been in this sport, um, I have been able. I've wrestled. I've refereed. I've wrestled. I've managed. I commentate. I produce. Um, I can do. I can literally do it all. But there's even now with me doing commentary, it's hard for me to get booked wrestling, uh, looked at serious as a wrestler. Something they're like, oh, you're just a commentator now. And I'm like, commentary to me is the greatest is a one of the greatest unsung jobs ever
Yeah.
because it's our job to get the athletes over, and I love it because I can talk about what I see and paint the picture for the audience. And I'm like the conscience of pro wrestling. I'm your conscience, and I got into commentary kind of it was a blessing, but then my frustration is what kept me there because I had been places where I would wrestle and I would get the DVD or the CD or whatever, look forward to see my match and the commentators are talking about anything but what's going on inside the ring.
Oh boy.
And there've been times where I've been injured, and the commentators are talking about something way off the wall, and it was just always a frustration for me. So when I started getting the opportunities at Ring of Honor, just because I was any situation I was in, I was always the spokesperson of my group. There's times you're feuding with somebody, you're sitting there doing commentary. I was never one of those that just sit there and talk about me during commentary. I would make it about what's in the ring, because to me, it's just once you step in that square circle, your life is on the line. I've seen people's lives change because of stepping through that rope.
Yeah.
So I know people that died stepping through that rope. I know people that life will never be the same because of and not because of anything they've done wrong. It's just you're literally putting your life on the line when you step in between those ropes. And so what I do on the outside of the ring with commentary, it's not my job to get me over. It's my job to get you over. And if I get you over enough, it gets me over.
Yeah. And you would think the promoters would want that because here you are in a unique position of having decades of in-ring experience and the commentary. So now when you're doing work in the ring, you know what a commentator is looking for. You know what they're
Yeah.
looking for to call, and vice versa. When you're doing commentary, you know what a wrestler is hoping for you to call, hoping for what you say. So
Yeah, the blessing now is I'm able to work with a lot of these up and coming stars and I'm kind of like old school, new class, so I'm able to see a lot of these new guys that the world hasn't seen yet, and actually feel them. And I feel now, the way it's worked out is that like I am a modern day Jerry Lawler, where it's like I do commentary on TV and I wrestle on the indies,
it's a great way of
and
putting it.
yeah, and I'm respected in all of those areas, and all, and so I really have nothing to complain about. It's just I hear mostly fans. They're like, "Oh, you're just a commentator now," and I'm like, "Bruh, you have no idea the importance of that job,
Yeah.
and the longevity that it's given my career, and the blessing behind it for me is the fact that like when I was a wrestler, and even wrestling now, you know, the best I ever was on big time wrestling was mid card. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like I never was really. I'm not a person that's gonna try to blow smoke up anything or say I should have this or da da da. it's like the biggest I ever was like, number one contender for television title type stuff. You know what I mean? Mid card type stuff. But like as commentary, I'm in the talks of the greatest commentators of all time. I'm in those conversations, Rick Abani and now, and so it's like we have plans for our life, but God knows what he wants to do.
Yeah.
So I was never like, oh, best wrestlers in the world. I was never, in that conversation. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But when they talk about best commentators in the world, I'm in that conversation. So I know I'm where I'm supposed to be at, and I'm a good wrestler too.
Oh yeah, yeah, you're good at both or great at both, and that's what makes you special. I do have a question though. We have wrestlers and future wrestlers who watch the channel and watch these clips, and when it comes to the commentary, I've always been curious about something, and I'm sure others are too. Wrestlers coming to you ahead of time before their match. Do you welcome that? Do you want them to tell you the story of the match? Do you like how much would you in a perfect world like to know ahead of time from the talent? Not from, who's ever producing it, but from the talent themselves. How much back and forth would you like to have before a match, ideally?
I think it's beautiful. I've been on enough. I've been on both sides, to where you want to get your stuff over. You want the people to know who you are, and so I'm not one on A B C D E F G. But if you got a story to tell, like, hey, this is technician versus high flyer, or this is strong guy versus speed, or this is what I'm saying. This is the story behind this is this or whatever like that, and this is going to be a big deal, and this is going to happen. Absolutely, tell me, absolutely, because I could plant seeds. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Without giving away or whatever like that. I don't need to know the whole match, but if there's something big that's going to happen, and we know it ahead of time, we can plant seeds for it that nobody knows is being planted. Like, you know what I'm saying? And then when it happens, it's bigger. You see what I'm saying?
I think it can help with the tone too, right? The tone you want to portray.
Absolutely. And you could build it up. And also, so yeah, I would love to know. Like I said, I don't need to know move for move what's happening or whatever, but like if there's a tone you want to set, or if there's the reason why this happened is because of this and this injury here, or we know each other and this and that. And so when this happens, it's because they're familiar with this, da 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 da. Oh yeah, because I've been in those situations. And that's a deeper part of the story, to where it lets the fans realize, oh, this is what's happening. And I think for a long time when I was getting opportunities doing commentary, I just, I didn't feel I was great. I was told that, I got something, Kevin Kelly and Hunter, the Ring of Honor Hunter, and Steve Carino, they was like, Caprice, you got something there. There's a hum in your voice and the passion, you can hear it when you do it. And they literally let me learn commentary on TV, and Kevin Kelly he would tell me the truth. He's a straight shooter, man. He would tell me what's good, what's bad, and I didn't just come out and was great. I was given an opportunity to learn, and I'm forever grateful. But yeah, it's just that it's that serious to me.
And hearing what you say about it, the reason why I kind of jogged my thought process is Mick Foley recently told a story. When he was in WCW, he had a match with Vader, and the great Bobby the Brain Heenan was the commentator. But Bobby the Brain Heenan was a very funny commentator a lot of times. Don't get me wrong, he was obviously incredible, but he didn't always necessarily add the emotion, especially in WCW, or at least that's Foley's belief.
Yeah.
And he had a match with Vader where, he took like a power bomb on the stage or something. And instead of it being a huge dramatic moment, Bobby the Brain Heenan made a headache joke. And I'm sure it was hilarious. Bobby the Brain Heenan is hilarious, but it wasn't what Foley had imagined. And you would think like maybe if he had gone to them ahead of time and said, this is what we're kind of looking for this moment, he could have helped with that.
Yeah. And that's, like I said, that's the frustration with commentary, that I've had too. Is like, that shows the importance of commentary, is that, we set the tone. And I'm witty. I'll throw jokes out there or whatever like that, but there's a time and place for it. You know what I mean? And the main thing, I can't say anything bad about Bobby Heenan, and I don't know the exact spot. And I know whatever Foley's saying, he's telling his truth. Yeah. What I do know is that there's time and place for everything. And when these people are on the line and somebody takes a move like that, the last thing you want to do is joke about somebody that literally could have died by taking these moves that we're trained to do. If it's done to somebody else that doesn't know how to take it, they would be in the hospital. Period.
Yeah.
Let me power bomb you. You're gonna bang your head on the ground, and you're gonna get concussions, or you're gonna have seizures. You're gonna be hurt. You know what I'm saying? And so to downplay any of that stuff to me is an insult. You know what I mean? And that's just the way I am now. And so I don't know. There's a lot of people that got flack with commentary. I think Jim Cornette was probably one of the best commentators in the world.
He's great.
He just got to a place where this world isn't the same world it was, in the early '90s and in the '80s.
Yeah.
You can't say things, you can't get away with saying things that you could get away with then. And his wit doesn't come, like, you don't write wit down. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It just comes out. And whatever's in you is gonna come out. You know what I mean? And so a lot of this stuff, it comes to your head and you're saying it, and words are like toothpaste. You just can't put it back in after you say it. And so that's why he got in a lot of trouble, because that wit inside of him is stuff that he's been saying for years. It's just the years have changed. And now some of the things that he was able to say, 10, 15 years ago, nobody batted an eye to, you get canceled for today.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're back. A question I wanted to ask, just because the scene was so different then. You were doing Omega in the offshoots, and I know eventually you did NWA Wildside, but before that, could you just talk about like the North Carolina and the Carolina indie scene, and when you started branching off, going to other places? Like, what did that look like at the time?
Yeah, just like I said, man, the indie scene in the late '90s, early 2000s, everybody was doing the old school wrestling. The call it in the ring, old school, type stuff. And a lot of them still do it today. I think the greatest old school wrestler of all times is and forever will be George South. And he's the type of guy, man, you don't even have to call out anything with him. All you got to do is go in the ring and listen. And he's got you, because he hears the crowd and he knows where to go. And he's just a master. He can go in the ring and the match won't start for 10 minutes because he's taking his jacket off and got the crowd worked up just taking his jacket off. Like he's a master at it. But there's also that's kind of what everybody was. It was just the old school body slam, clothesline, leg drop, suplex type thing, and just personalities is where everybody was. So when I got into different indies, it was good for me, because it was kind of like Shannon Moore. It was like they see this skinny guy and they're like, oh, okay, he's going to be this tail whoop. And then you're jumping off the rope and doing corkscrew moonsaults, and you're doing innovative stuff, and you're spinning around turnbuckles, and they're like, wow, this guy's amazing. I've never seen anything like that before. You know what I'm saying? Because they're thinking you're going to go in there and just, try to lock up and body slam a big guy, and they know you're not going to do it. But then my job, I feel like even Shannon's job, anybody that was smaller in pro wrestling, in Omega, and pro wrestling period, I guess, but I know for a fact in Omega, it was our job to show the fans why I'm in the ring and you're not.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So if I'm near your size, and I've always been in, pretty good shape, but I mean, if I'm weighing, when I first started wrestling, I might have weighed 160 pounds. You know what I mean? Right. And so why would somebody in the crowd that's bigger than me think, man, I could beat this guy? Like they would, if looking at me, you think, oh, I could probably beat this guy, But then when I get in the ring and I'm doing stuff, they're like, nah, I leave this dude alone. He crazy. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the difference even today, is that, if you are a smaller guy, I believe size matters, period. You know what I'm saying? But but the reason why it matters is you have to know what you have and what you can do with what you have. Like if you're a smaller guy, wrestle like you're a smaller guy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If you're a big guy, wrestle like you're a big guy. If you're a hybrid, wrestle like a hybrid. Know who you are. And the worst thing you could do is be deceptive to yourself. And then you're somebody that's small trying to do big moves, or you're somebody that's big, trying to do small moves and not efficient. Now, if you could do it, amazing, but like you don't have to. Like you know what I'm saying?
Kind of like the old expression, use who you are to your advantage. So even if it's something
Absolutely.
that's perceived as a negative, you switch it around and make it part of your package.
The best guy in the world right now for that, hands down, is Cheeseburger.
Yeah.
He
Oh
knows
yeah.
who he is. He knows his size. He knows what he can do. He knows how to play with it. He knows how to get sympathy. He's amazing.
He's a
He's
guy I hope to
amazing.
talk to in the future too on the channel because
Yeah.
he's all right. Another thing, the period of time in which we're talking about, you know, I'm guessing around 97 is when he started hanging around before he started wrestling in 98. This was,
Mm-hmm.
and then 99, 2000, this was the boom, right? This was the
99. I'm sorry, it's a song. Go ahead.
this was the rise though, the attitude era, the big crowds. Did you notice like through 98 and 99 and even on the indies, like were you seeing like crowds getting bigger and more intense, or was it you were still so new it wasn't really something that was clicking for you?
I don't know if it clicked. Because at that time, honestly, I was a bigger WCW fan than a WWF fan.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because to me, WCW had the more relatable people. It was real people. It wasn't, WWF was more like characters. Everybody was a character somehow. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Kane, The
They were,
Undertaker, Mankind.
yeah, it was a character. It was your, the somebody, it was a character. It was a
Yeah.
cartoon character, but WCW was an actual person that, became a wrestler type thing, and so I was really engulfed in especially the cruiserweight division, like Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Juventud Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, like Brian Pillman, like Jushin Liger, like these guys to me it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. You know what I'm saying? And so that I was a huge fan of the cruiserweight division.
We won't be able to get to it now. Hopefully, someday in the future, we'll be able to chat again with an interview, months down the line, next year, some other time when you're free. Thank you. You were such a good guest, and I appreciate it. We can't get to NWA Wildside. I had a bunch of questions related to that, like I was hoping
Go
for.
ahead, man. I'm chilling. I'm good. We
Okay,
good.
cool.
Do what you
Thank you
gotta
so
do.
much. But
Yeah.
right before we get to NWA Wildside, what were your goals in wrestling as you were breaking in? Like, did you think, oh, I want to be signed to WCW? I want to go to, you said you weren't as big into WWF, but you want to go there, or were you just like, hey, I want to do this, or I want to make a living doing this? Like, where was your head at?
I honestly, and I think I kind of said it before, when I went to NWA Wildside, in my head, NWA Wildside was the next big thing.
Yeah.
Like it was, I'm on TV. I was literally on TV every week. So I'm thinking like this is the next big thing. And one day we're gonna be able to make a living at this thing. And then I think NWA Wildside is what woke me up because then WCW came there and for a while
It's like a
NWA
developmental.
Wildside was a developmental. So I'm seeing the Jim Tracks and Bob Saps and these guys come in and I'm like, wow. So then I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna end up going to WCW. Like, you know what I'm saying? It just never worked out that way for me. That's a whole nother story. It's just is what it is. And so then when I start seeing that, wow, WCW is here, it opened my eyes to where it's like I can actually be on TV. Like, you know what I'm saying? When Matt and Jeff got signed, to me it was kind of like an anomaly because
Yeah.
it was like, man, that's just they hit the lotto type because they're so unique. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna be next. It was just kind of like, well, they're gone. Like they're of course they're the best. You know what I mean? But then when WCW came to NWA Wildside, and then people at NWA Wildside were getting booked with them because Bill Barron's like the book was the booker at the time, but he also had an in, to where the WWE and WCW would call him when they were in Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia for wrestlers. And so you started getting extra work through NWA Wildside. And it was through there that I realized, man, I can actually get picked up That's where I got all my WCW my WWE matches from.
Yeah, and there's like 3 or 4 people from there that I'm thinking of right in my head from Wild Side or around there who end up getting signed. AJ Styles, of course, him and
Yeah,
Air Paris, they went right there. And
it,
I'd definitely like to hear about your dealings with them in the past.
yeah. AJ Styles, R-Truth, and
Noble.
it's so many. Yes, Jamie, absolutely. There's so many guys that came through there. I don't want to just start naming names because I know I'm gonna forget
Yeah.
somebody. But it was and they're still around. There's a ridiculous amount of names. And the funny thing about it, honestly, is that a lot of the people that worked in NWA Wild Side then are still in wrestling now, but they're behind the scenes
Yeah. Like,
doing stuff. So that's what I think is really amazing.
and Bill Behrens, you brought him up, and he's still doing stuff with wrestling these days, just as you
Hmm.
brought up.
Hmm.
How did you actually get into NWA, and what were your dealings with Bill Behrens? Like, was he your NWA Wildside? Was he your in? Did someone like put you guys together? Like, how did you connect? Do you remember?
My connection there was Shannon
All
Moore.
right,
Shannon Moore and Matt was my. I went up there with Matt one time, and I actually tagged with I want to say I was supposed to tag. They were going to bring me in as R-Truth's tag team partner.
all right,
Because Chris Hemrick was his tag team partner at the time, and I think Chris Hemrick was getting signed, and so I was going to be R-Truth's tag team partner. But I think R-Truth started getting looks too, so he would never show up. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
At those times or whatever. And so they started doing that at this time, but it was before it was NWA Wildside, it was called NCW, and it had a different owner. But Matt, so I started going with the Ghetto Boys. I think it was there. It was a group of black wrestlers that had formed a faction, and basically what they did was they took the most of the time what they did was anytime there was a black wrestler, they just made them part of the Ghetto Boys or this faction. And so it was never the same people. But like they would be the tag team champions or whatever like that. And just whoever showed up that was black would be it. So like the first time I ever was booked with NCW in the NWA Wildside Arena, I was like NCW tag team champions.
Representation sure has changed a little bit since
Yeah,
then.
yeah. But it was just the way that's just the way it was. Like I'm a ghetto. I think that was the name. It was like we're the Ghetto Boys or whatever. It was like whatever. And so I was like, okay, this is how this starts. And I didn't know, you don't know how deep it gets, but like, yeah, that was my first. And then Shannon Moore and Shane Helm started going to NWA Wildside when it became NWA Wildside. And then it was also going to Burt Prentice in Tennessee to wrestle. And I was supposed to go when they went. And I broke my ankle.
Oh,
And I broke my ankle like the week before I was supposed to go with them. We were all supposed to show up at the same time. And they went and I was out for like 3 months or whatever. And by the time I was healed and ready to go, they were gone. But so I came in with Laz with like the next group or whatever, and then I was kind of with that group or whatever. But Shannon and they were there and they got picked up and they were gone. But I was on the shelf. And so sometimes I look back in there and be like, man, what would have happened if or where? But you never know. You know what I
yeah.
mean? I don't know where my head was or what would have happened. And you can't look back at what all you could do is go forward. And I look at my future now, and God has made my latter greater than my past, and so I can't complain.
What's interesting is looking at my notes. You like you said, you hurt your ankle. You were gone for several months. You came back in December of 2000, and you won the NWA Wildside Junior Heavyweight title right away. Like it might have been your
Yeah.
first show back. Did you like? Obviously, it's always an appreciation of your talent and everything like that. But did you see it as okay? They clearly have faith in me here. If they're giving me such a big opportunity right away, is that kind of what your mindset was for that, or were you just kind of like, okay, cool?
I want to find out where you're getting these notes from, bro. Because like you telling stuff and you're telling the truth that I don't even realize. It's somebody. I don't want to change the subject, but like somebody was telling me the truth Sunday I was at a show, DPW, and after he told me, it like brought tears to my eyes because he was telling me stuff I never realized until he told me. But yeah, uh, I don't know. It was just a big deal to me. I think before I left, they were taking me serious. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And then when I came back, it just showed me how serious they were taking me. Because like AJ Styles, JC Daz, and all this was there, and even AJ Styles was giving me opportunities. I started working for this place called Christian Wrestling Federation, and because of AJ Styles' faith in me, the first time I ever got on an airplane was because of AJ Styles speaking up for me. Um, and for the Christian wrestler, he was like, "Hey man, I got this guy here. He's a real Christian and he's a great wrestler.
Do you know
You
where
know, you
this
should
was
bring
at?
him in." It's in Dallas, Texas. It's
Oh,
still
okay.
there. Christian Wrestling Federation. They're still going strong. But I started, wrestling with them, whatever, because of AJ Styles, and he was a great guy, man, and we both, have faith. We're both Christians, and so that was kind of our thing. But he would always. I remember my one of my biggest memories with AJ Styles is I tagged with him one time, and I think it was like a 6-man tag or something like that. And before the match, we had like a promo, and so the promo starts, and of course, I'm Caprice Coleman, so I'm doing my Caprice Coleman promo or whatever. And after the promo, AJ Styles was like, "I hate you." I was like, he's literally he's like, "I hate you." And I was like, "Why?" He's like, "Because," he said, "you could wrestle, you could talk." He was just saying like you could do it. It was a compliment.
Yeah.
He wasn't saying I hate you. Like I can't.
No,
He
I
was
know.
just like, man, he was like, you could do everything. He's like, he thought I was. It was a big compliment. He's like, you're amazing. And he was just wishing me the best and all. But um, he was the most athletic person I've ever seen. It was like when I got to NWA Wildside, I was the athletic person everywhere I went.
Mhm.
But then there was JC Daz and AJ Styles and a lot of Sal and Nero. Well, Sal didn't come till later. Slim J, they didn't come till later, but it was these guys that was so athletic that it made me have to change who I was, because I'm thinking, oh, I go in here and once I do a corkscrew moonsault or once I do a shooting star press, that I'm gonna blow the roof off the place. And then you walk in the room, you walk in the back, and the first match got a shooting star press, and you're like, what the heck?
You couldn't just be the athletic guy anymore.
Right. I was like, what do I have? And like I said, I was called to preach when I was 14 years old. So I've always um been used to speaking in front of crowds, and so the next thing I had was my mouth. I didn't even realize that it was a gift until Bill Barons is the one that was letting me. He was like, he said, "It's your mouth, bro."
Yeah.
And he would give me a microphone anytime he had a chance. And that's where I was able to hone my craft there.
And for someone like AJ, it took a long time for him to refine that. Now, like, completely different guy on the microphone compared to what he used to be. He's evolved so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he's gonna keep he's one that, um he's so good that where he is now, it's almost like you still haven't seen AJ Styles. Like,
Which
you
is
know what I'm
wild.
saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if you knew the AJ Styles that I knew and you see him on WWE now, he's amazing still. But it's like he can do it, WWE. It's like WWE makes you who they want you to be. You get what
Mhm.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so sometimes they will put a lid on you, but it's for the greater good.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
it's it's for the greater good. It's not like, oh, you're good, don't be good. It's like, don't do this because that, you know what I'm saying?
They just want
And
you in a certain
so
pocket,
yeah, they put you in, and that's kind of like some people get frustrated with it, but if you're not a billionaire, you really don't have an opinion that that could change it, because if you're a billionaire company, evidently you know kind of what you're talking about, like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
And
But
AJ's good enough to adjust where he can be what they
yeah,
want him to be.
and it's been a kryptonite for some people, because the frustration of the pocket they put you in is, like you said, with the Jim Cornette or with the Jason Art, how you can't go from somebody that can't wrestle to somebody that can. That's the frustration that, I guess some WWE guys would have, is that, you get given a character that's supposed to be hokey dokey, and then you come out to be serious who you are, and you're not taken serious because of the character you were given before. So I understand all aspects of the frustrations and all of that. But I kind of get it too, and so at the end of the day, it's in this sport, it's about money and what's
Yeah.
going to draw the fans and what's going to bring them back. And that's the way it's looked at.
And shout out to AJ because, in my opinion, he still might have the best drop kick and backdrop of wrestling ever. His backdrop, the way he takes it, beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely,
I just
absolutely.
I just want to touch on two other guys. You touched on them briefly before, but Sal Renaro.
Mm-hmm.
Again, channel favorite, great dude. He took a chance on me when no one else. No one else. I never even asked anyone. He was the guy who was like, "Sure, I'll do it. I'll talk to you. I'll tell you about my career." And he's looked out for me since, and I can't say enough good things about him. He came into NWA Wildside. Is that where you first met him?
Yeah, mm-hmm. And he was a kid, man. Him and Slim J came in around the same time, and they were like teenagers. And I think because they lived pretty close to the NWA Wildside Arena, him, Azriel, and man, what's the other guy?
Well, there is someone else I wanted to talk about. I don't know if he's who you mean,
Yeah,
Jimmy Rave, because I do want to ask
no,
about
no,
Rave.
no, no,
Okay.
no. It wasn't Jimmy Rave. It was Azriel's tag team partner. I'm friends with him now. He's a preacher now, but I forget his
Oh.
his wrestling name. But anyway, they were the Lost Boys, is what their tag team name was. But they all were teenagers. They were like just teenagers that lived pretty close to the arena, and they would come to the shows as fans. But then they just wanted to train,
Mhm.
and so they started training, and so I'm literally watching these guys, and at the first you're like, they're kids, they're freaking kids, you're like, these are kids. But
Yeah.
then when you see that these aren't kids that are coming in here just trying to do whatever, they are amazing. And Sal Renaro was never the athlete type guy. Sal Renaro was a born entertainer with a great mind for wrestling.
So much
Like
personality.
he had idea, personality, and like he was one that looked forward to putting people over with he had an art for making people look good, and he would intentionally be the butt of a joke and create the butt of the joke to get you over. That's how that was Saronaro.
What a pro.
Like he was the ultimate, like, I got an idea, and you're listening to it. And 9 times out of 10, when a wrestler says, I got an idea, it's a way to make them look cool. Let me do this to you. Like, but Saronaro is like, I got an idea, and you listen to him. And I'm like, but that's gonna make you, yeah, I know, but it's gonna get a huge pop. And when you do it, when it comes out, and everybody thinks about it, you think about the mindset that's gonna happen, and then when it comes, it's gonna be a grab. Sure. And then you do it, and it's like,
It's
wow,
right. Yeah.
he's right, and that's the way he was.
I believe Gabriel
Yeah,
was who you were talking about, by the way.
there you go. Azrael and Gabriel. Yep. Where do you got a database somewhere, man, and you're like pulling this stuff out? This is a fun interview because you know what you're talking about.
Well, there's a few places I shout out to Cage Match. They have a lot of information there. But before I do the interviews, I try to do a bunch of research, so I have dates or whatever I need where possible.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
The other
Well,
person,
you gonna
and
talk?
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. I think you're gonna say it now.
Yeah, the person I was going to ask about, unfortunately, he passed away not too long ago, who you definitely saw regularly back then, Jimmy Rave. Could you talk a little bit about Jimmy Rave? Because I know him and Sal at one point were, the best of friends, and Sal talked
Yeah,
about him extensively.
yeah. Jimmy Rave, man. He when Jimmy Rave came to NWA Wildside, I was the cruiserweight champion or the lightweight champion or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he came, he was, like I said, he was a kid. I think he might have been 17, 18 years old, ridiculously skinny, or whatever. And they was like, okay, Caprice, you're gonna be wrestling this guy. And I was like, okay, whatever. Um, and then there was like a lot. Like Bill fell in love with him. Like, Bill Behrens was already in love with Jimmy Rave before Jimmy Rave even started wrestling at NWA Wildside. I guess he saw him at some other show,
Mhm.
and he just knew that he was a star. And so I was just kind of like, who's this kid? And I probably had an ego at the time because I'm like, I'm a champion, and I'm getting in shape, and for me, it's always been the Caprice Coleman, you're good, but you're small. Caprice Coleman, you're good, but you're light. Caprice Coleman, you're good, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was always these things where then there's this guy that comes in and he's like, 50 pounds lighter than you and doesn't do this and doesn't do that. And you're like, oh, this is what am I, what I mean? What am I working for? Whatever like that. But working with him, Sal Rinauro, like I said, was the guy that had these ideas that makes himself the butt of the joke. But Jimmy Rave was the guy that had ideas that you would never think of in pro wrestling that was so simple. Like he had a mind for wrestling that I think if he was if he was alive today and people knew who he would be one of the greatest producers in pro wrestling right
Mhm.
now, without a doubt, because he knew how to work a crowd, he knew how to draw heat, he knew how to draw sympathy. Whatever role Jimmy Rave was, whether he was the heel or the baby, he knew that role, and like he would sell like no other. He could draw sympathy like no other, and he could draw heat like he's the only wrestler I know that whatever role he was playing, you believed it, and like you cheered for him or you booed him. It was no in between.
Mhm.
And like even you could go to Ring of Honor, and when he was the crown jewel, people would
The
threw
toilet paper.
toilet paper in like you know what I'm saying? Like they hated him, and it was because, oh, you can't do this, but he's like, you can't wrestle, you can't do this, and he was one of the greatest wrestlers, greatest technicians. But like he intentionally would pull stuff back, and like he just
Mhm.
knew, and it was like his mind was like, it's like he was I don't even know, like a fortune teller of pro wrestling.
And see, that's
He
so
just
smart
knew.
though, because like
Yeah,
if you're in a company of people who are doing all these moves and showing what amazing wrestlers they are, to pull back, like you just said, that's so smart. Like you wouldn't even think about
oh,
that, but
he would come up with stuff that like a lot of his stuff got stolen too, man. He had this. Oh man, he one time I was wrestling him, and he was like, uh, "I'm gonna open your mouth and I'm gonna spit it," and I said, "Yeah, right." You know what I'm saying? You're not. I don't trade DNA with nobody. You feel me? And so, and he was like, "I'm not gonna do it, Caprice. He's just gonna look like it." You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
And we didn't imagine at this time Jimmy Rave was the heel, because for most of our feud, I was the heel and he was the baby. And it's rare the Caprice Coleman heel thing, but I came in NWA Wildside as a heel, and so I was the heel or whatever. But this time I was the baby and he was the heel, and he does that move, and like the sound in the arena was like a gasp of like, that was the grossest thing anybody's ever saw in a wrestling. Like it was just like they didn't know how to respond to it.
Hmm.
It was like the greatest thing. He would come up with stuff like that. Like, you know what I'm saying?
And was
He
he
knew
good at
where to
not getting
put
it
stuff.
in?
Say what?
Did he end up living up to his word too about not actually doing it? Like, did he?
Yeah, he didn't actually. No, he just made it look like he would make up and he did all that stuff, and I'm sure he's spit in some people's mouths. I don't know. I don't want to know. Yeah, I don't know. I just never crossed that bridge in pro wrestling. I don't trade DNA, baby. Uh, so, but yeah, he would come up with stuff like that, man. It's just his mind. He was a genius. He was a legit genius, and not just with him, not just with his stuff. Like he could see you and give you stuff that will make you better. He don't even have to be wrestling. He just knowing who you are, and he would have an idea for who you are and what would look good if you did this, and he would be right.
Wow.
I mean, like that's what I'm saying. Like he would be probably the greatest producer in pro wrestling if he was alive and healthy and healthy. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Um, and the problem with Jimmy, like people know, he was constantly fighting his demons.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was his kryptonite. You know, he never really got a handle on that. And then when he did, it was kind of too late. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
But bruh, like he was a genius, and he was a genius. He was a genius.
I can't imagine the car rides with him and Sal talking wrestling. You know what I mean? Because like Sal
Yeah,
told me, like they used to talk on the phone or hang out and talk about like Ray's feud with CM Punk that everybody loved from Ring of Honor. Like those two would just sit there, Sal and Raven. They would just bat ideas around, throw ideas around, and
yeah.
probably responsible for a lot of the reason why. So obviously Punk was incredible too. But
Yeah, it's just stuff like that where Jimmy Rave always knew the role he was in. If he was the underdog, he would be the underdog. If he was the cheap heel, he would play it to the T and make you believe whatever he was doing. He would make you believe it, and that's just the way. That was his art. That was his art. That's what made him so good is that he could morph into anything, and make you believe that's who he was. Kind of the only person I can even think is even close to that would have to be like Chris Jericho.
yeah,
But Chris Jericho never really changed everything. He just made subtle changes with his characters. You know what I'm
mm,
saying?
more nuanced kind
Uh,
of deal.
yeah, nuances type thing. But he's still a genius. But like Jimmy Ray was the only one that could totally say he could he could he could have you crying for him one night and wanting to kill him the next in the ring.
It's great. Before we hit plugs, I like to finish interviews up with this question, and hopefully, if we do a second interview in the future, which I would love, because like I said, I have so many notes still. We only got to like I don't know 2000 ish. So, but but the question I'd probably ask again because it changes. What does the future look like for Caprice Coleman?
Oh, it's great, man. And I'll tell you why. Is because I leave it in God's hand, and I'm not like, oh, whatever God says, I do. It's like faith without works is dead,
Hmm.
and I'm past what I can do. I'm nothing. I've done my best, and I got an applause, maybe been mid Carter, wherever like that, and it's like, oh, good job, Caprice. Oh, Caprice Coleman, yeah, I think I know who that is, But I've given everything to God, man, and all I do is try my best, and whatever He allows me to do, He does it, And so it may sound crazy to you or whatever, I don't know, but I'm to a point now where my faith is. I think faith is not, oh, you believe something and you believe it'll happen. It's going to happen because you really believe it'll happen. That's not faith. That's wishing. That's wishing upon a star. Faith is believing in who God is and how much He loves you and how much He is willing to do for you. That He could literally do whatever He wants to do with you, but it's how much faith you have in Him. You know what I'm saying? And so if your faith in God uh, is enough faith to say, hey, God, I love what I'm doing, and I want to find a way to take what I'm doing to bless you, and you're real about it, He'll find a way to get the glory in your life, and that's what He does. So I'm not on, oh, I'm gonna be the greatest thing, I'm gonna be this and that or whatever. I'm gonna try my best at every opportunity that I'm given. Right
Mm,
now, I'm getting great opportunities at commentary, and I'm
yeah.
gonna always give 110%. So it's not, oh, because I'm a Christian, God is gonna put everything in front of me. You have to do your part.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like going to the gym. You could sign a membership at the gym, but it's on you to get in shape. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it's working your faith, man. And I work my faith because I believe in who God is. I believe He's the Creator. I believe Jesus is the Son of God. I believe every word in the Bible. And it sounds crazy, but hey, I'm 46 years old, and I don't look it because I believe that He's extended my youth. You know what I'm saying? He's made my latter days my greater. He has literally turned back the time on my career and giving me longevity. And so if you don't believe it, that's fine. But I'm in great shape. I'm 46 years old, and I don't look it and I don't feel it. But it's all because of the grace of God. You know what I mean? So I can't say next for Caprice Coleman is this. I want to say next for Caprice Coleman, he has a great commentary career, and he's able to do commentary on a big, continue to do commentary on a big stage, and he's allowed to do some wrestling matches too. But I love commentary. I don't want to give up my commentary career and become the next best wrestler. You know what I'm saying? But I believe one day I can be respected for being able to do both at a high level.
And you brought
That's
up
what I
Jerry
want to
Lawler,
do.
the Jerry Lawler
Yeah,
bit. Is that kind of what you see where you don't plan to slow down in the ring anytime soon? Maybe commentary is going to be your primary focus, but do you still plan on, as far as you can see into the future for now, as long as you're healthy and happy with it and everything goes like you hope, wrestling's still, you're still going to be doing matches on the side as long as you're able to?
absolutely. Absolutely. I had a match. This weekend was one of my funnest weekends because I had a match Friday night. I preached Sunday morning, and I had did commentary Sunday night, and then came
Wow.
back home and did it again. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, it's that's my life, man, and I love it. Like I can wrestle, and I'm a preacher, and I do commentary, and then I'm a mentor for a lot. I do training. It's God has allowed me to make a living being me. What do I have to complain about?
Absolutely. And on top of all that, you're also a delightful podcast guest. Thank you so very much for today. One more time, where can people check you out?
Twitter, Caprice Coleman, Instagram, the Caprice Coleman, and I guess TikTok, the Caprice Coleman are my main places. Pro Wrestling Tees is where I guess my shirts are, or whatever. Yeah, that's it, man.
And again,
That's
guys,
it. Keep watching Ring of Honor.
absolutely.
Ring of Honor. Watch ROH.com. It is the sport of professional wrestling. If you want wrestlers that you want to see wrestling matches, you want to see great wrestling matches with some entertainment. Of course, we got entertainers, but you want to see the athletes, not just the flippy guys, the athletes. You know what I'm saying? Guys that take the sport serious.
Sport-based presentation.
Watch ROH.com.
And guys, we will have links to everything in the description. So again, be sure to follow. Let's get his Instagram numbers up, back with the new one. Buy a t-shirt. And also follow us on Twitter at Armbar and Sidebar, on Instagram at Armbars and Sidebars, and on YouTube at Armbars and Sidebars. Be sure to subscribe. Make sure to leave some comments and likes. It helps the YouTube algorithm. And this was episode 16. Thank you again so very much. Incredible. Hopefully we get to do a part 2 in the future. You were a delight. And I can't say enough good things. Thank you so much. Until next time, guys. Later.
All right. Yeah.